We are seeing an increasing number of people with gut and intestinal symptoms that they are unable to correct using the standard methods. So stress and anxiety can create the original stimulus which triggers intestinal issues. This leads to a cortisol response which increases inflammation and alters the nervous stimulation to the gut, causing heartburn, irritable bowel syndrome, diarrhea, constipation, and eventually immune compromise. This inflammation also causes poor nutrient absorption and increased sensitivities, which often show up as allergies, skin rashes, and eczema. Correcting the inflammation requires a holistic approach. Our intestinal lining and gut are actually the source of almost every disease you can name. It is the beginning of every disease. 70% of the immune system lies in the gut. 70% of our neurological system lies in the gut. We now have research over the last 5 years showing that all of the pathology that is present in Parkinson's and Alzheimer's in the brain is present 20 years before. So if you really wanted to predict something, you're better off biopsying the intestinal lining, which is where the nervous system is. You might have heard of something called the happy neurotransmitter, which is serotonin. Serotonin is made in the last third of the small intestine, which means if you have an intestinal issue, chances are you're going to have depression too, because you won't make enough serotonin. In our practice over the years, any kind of intestinal symptom, either primary or secondary, has been an extremely red flag for us to pay a lot of attention to. We pursue these aggressively. What we're really looking to do is get people off of the medications, because these standard medications, I'll give you an example. The class called proton pump inhibitors, PPIs, things like Prilosec and Prevacid and Zantac and things like that. These are actually medications that control the hydrogen from hydrochloric acid that's causing the symptom. But the problem with that is that very hydrogen is actually needed to digest your food. So what do you think happens when you block the hydrogen? What happens is you don't absorb B12 or iron. You're not absorbing the normal nutrients. You're not addressing the inflammation on the lining of the gut, which means 5 years later, you've got consequences. You've got these medications associated with bone loss, with dementia, with any chronic illness you can think of, because we didn't correct the base. And as a matter of fact, it's led to a recommendation and a warning on most of these proton pump inhibitors that says don't use for more than 3 to 6 months. That leaves people who treat the gastric system in a quandary, because what are you going to do when you can't control the symptom? And what you really should do is go back to the lining and correct the inflammation. Another standard approach to gastric issues is to look for a bug and then to use antibiotics. The main one that you'll see in the news a lot these days is H. pylori, but there's many other ones. And it turns out that when you have an inflamed intestinal lining where 70% of the immune system lives, you are going to expect that bacteria that should not multiply are multiplying. So you basically have a complete imbalance in the bacteria. All of these methods can control symptoms temporarily, but they cannot cure the underlying problem. For example, a proton pump inhibitor can control heartburn. It cannot cure the underlying inflammation in the lining, which needs probiotics and enzymes. An antibiotic can kill bad bugs, but it cannot correct the immune dysfunction and imbalance in the bacteria, because it kills the good bugs too, and that creates even more susceptibility to future infection. A laxative can produce more frequent bowel movements, but it cannot control causes such as the need for more hydration, better motility, and better thyroid function. In almost 30 years of practicing medicine, I have learned that if you restore the miraculous body to an optimal state, it will heal itself. In thousands of patients, we have been able to achieve this by using the 5-point model. The following steps have been proven in thousands of patients. 1. Reduce both physical and mental activities while filling your fuel tank. This means commit to restoration in nature, meditation, joy, sleep, water, deep breathing, and following your heart in all things. Stop all supplements. They are not absorbed. Anytime somebody has intestinal complaints, the nutrients that they're eating by food and supplements is not absorbed. The first step is to eliminate all inflammatory foods for 4 to 12 weeks, which means to eliminate dairy while the gut is healing, because dairy happens to be inflammatory if it is from a cow in the United States. Here we switch to almond, coconut, and hemp milk products. We ask that each person take a probiotic with every meal and probiozyme with every meal. Using this mechanism for 3 to 4 weeks, we then ask people to start weaning off the proton pump inhibitor. After 4 weeks, if they are symptom-free, they reduce the doses to maintenance. Maintenance requires pure biotic 1 to 2 capsules per day and probiozyme with heavy meals. If constipation is present, add magnesium RX until it's resolved. And if symptoms persist after 4 weeks, then we add aloe juice at half a cup twice a day and glutamine at the maximum dose tolerated and continue for about 12 weeks. This regimen will correct over 80% of heartburn, reflux, diarrhea, constipation, IBS, bloating after meals, eczema, allergies, and even Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Most people can discontinue their medication in about 12 weeks. Lastly, the cure for gastric health does require fermented foods to be reintroduced into the regular diet, as they can be more effective than probiotic pills. Over the years, the ancient traditions of routinely having fermented foods has disappeared, leading to more gut-related issues. The fermented foods that we have found to be invaluable here include kombucha, which is a fermented drink, and homemade fermented vegetables, which are not pasteurized. Recently, we have had exceptional results in chronic cases with coconut milk yogurt made with MD Prescriptive's probiotics. The great news is that very little is needed, up to a tablespoon a day, to actually correct the gut. We always address gastric symptoms as it is our opportunity to prevent disease. The beautiful thing that I've learned from taking care of thousands of patients is that when you restore optimal function in all 5 areas, you are reversing the risk of all disease so that you can have your best life ever.